Stop right there. Identify yourself.
Officer, I'm just on my morning walk. May I ask why you're stopping me?
We received a report. Step aside and show ID.
I'm Dwayne Johnson, attorney at law. Here's my identification.
Hands behind your back. Now.
I have done nothing unlawful. I am fully compliant.
Turn around. Don't argue.
The body cam is already rolling when everything fractures. A quiet residential street stretches into the soft morning sun, trees lining the sidewalks and scattering shadows across cracked concrete. Fallen leaves gather in edges and corners. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn mower hums, joined by the faint bark of a dog. A soft breeze moves through the branches, rattling loose leaves. Dwayne Johnson walks alone, briefcase in hand, folded documents pressing against the leather. His shoes scuff slightly on uneven concrete, producing a muted rhythm against the stillness. He is mid-40s, professional, calm, and deliberate. There is nothing hurried in his movements. This is a ritual walk he takes every morning, a quiet moment before the day begins. A patrol officer steps into frame. Close. Too close. His boots scrape the concrete, his weight shifted forward, hand hovering near his belt. The lens exaggerates proximity. For the first time in the frame, control is asserted not with words, but with presence. The officer's approach is sharp. Commands come before explanation. Dwayne stops immediately, not startled, only interrupted. He produces identification, moves slowly, deliberately, hands visible, voice calm. The officer glances at it briefly, gestures toward the sidewalk, and then the plastic cuffs appear. The restraint is clumsy. Not violent, but not careful either. A forearm presses against Dwayne's shoulder, turning him toward a fence. Cuffs click tight around his wrists, a small but precise moment of power exerted. The camera captures every detail, the subtle glint of sunlight on metal, the stretch of fabric over tense muscles, the faint rise and fall of Dwayne's chest compared to the officer's sharper exhalations. Across the street, life begins to notice. Mrs. Caldwell, a retired schoolteacher in her 60s, leans over her picket fence, mug in hand, her garden gloves still on. She freezes mid-sip, eyes narrowing, brow furrowed. 2 houses down, a teenager named Javier pauses his morning jog, earbuds dangling, breathing uneven from exertion. He shifts from foot to foot, unsure whether to step closer or retreat. On the sidewalk behind Dwayne, a postal worker, Mr. Singh, stops with his satchel slung over his shoulder. He squints at the body cam, at the movement of cuffs, at Dwayne's calm posture, and shakes his head subtly. From the driveway of a neighboring home, a young couple with a baby stroller halts. The baby coos, unaware. The mother instinctively shields the infant with her free hand while her partner leans forward, trying to see what's happening without stepping into danger. Dwayne's briefcase slips from his grip, landing on its side. Papers scatter. They flutter briefly, catching sunlight, before resting on the cracked concrete. The small sound of pages brushing against the ground amplifies the tension, more audible than voices. The officer does not explain the detention. No charge is read aloud. No lawful threat is stated. He adjusts the cuffs without comment. Dwayne's shoulders tighten for a moment, then relax again, still calm. A neighbor from across the street, Mr. Thompson, leans out of his window. His face is curious, cautious, concerned. He lifts a phone, hesitates, then lowers it, unsure whether to record, intervene, or call. The dog in 1 yard barks sharply, breaking the stillness, then falls silent. Leaves swirl in small eddies around Dwayne's feet. The camera picks up everything. The slight sweat forming on the officer's temple, the subtle tension in Dwayne's jaw, the flicker of light over metal cuffs. The officer's breathing is audible now, fast and shallow, a contrast to Dwayne's calm, measured rhythm. All the human reactions, Mrs. Caldwell frozen at the fence, Javier paused mid-step, Mr. Singh silent, the couple hesitant, layer the scene. Tension is not just between the 2 men. It radiates outward, touching the street, the houses, the morning routine of everyone nearby. And still, Dwayne remains composed. His gaze forward, posture straight, hands cuffed but controlled. The violation is quiet, procedural, and total. The body cam keeps rolling. The street watches. The morning waits. No one yet knows what will happen next. The sun rises slowly, yet the shadows cast by the trees deepen the sense of confinement on the narrow sidewalk. Dwayne's wrists ache slightly under the tight cuffs, but he does not react outwardly. The officer, however, shows signs of impatience. His stance shifts constantly, weight rocking from one foot to the other. The camera captures the subtle flare of his nostrils, the bead of sweat at his temple catching light. He mutters something indistinct, barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. Dwayne tilts his head just enough to indicate awareness, but says nothing. His eyes scan the street, noting the neighbors frozen in their morning routines, still, wary, uncertain. The officer steps closer, pressing the Bodycam wearer's perspective forward. Dwayne is forced against the fence. His shoulder grazes chipped paint. The briefcase and scattered papers lie untouched by the officer's boot, though a shadow of it hovers over them, threatening further disruption. Every move the officer makes is small but invasive, a slow assertion of control meant to unsettle. Down the street, Javier resumes his jog but slows, eyes darting nervously at the scene. He passes a security camera mounted on a garage and wonders if it caught anything, though he doesn't stop. Mrs. Caldwell leans harder on her fence, her mug forgotten. She whispers something under her breath to herself, tension creasing her forehead. The officer produces a notebook and pen, jabbing the air with it, as if writing Dwayne into a corner. He asks a question, sharp but vague. Dwayne responds in clipped, careful sentences. Each answer is met with repetition, insistence, subtle contradiction. The officer's tone escalates without cause, more volume than logic. A second patrol unit arrives silently, pulling to the curb. Tires crunch on gravel. The additional officer's shadow stretches over Dwayne's papers, bending the scattered documents further. Dwayne notices, but does not react, keeping his gaze level. He notes the new presence, the shift in energy, the implicit warning. The first officer does not acknowledge the backup, as though its arrival is his private validation. The neighbors react again. Mr. Singh steps further onto the sidewalk, satchel in hand, tentative. He watches the officer's movements, weighing whether to interfere or retreat. The couple with the baby shifts subtly, the infant squirming in the stroller. Mrs. Caldwell reaches for her phone but hesitates, frozen by the officer's body language and proximity. The first officer now gestures at Dwayne's briefcase. "Step back," he commands, voice sharp, fingers pointing. Dwayne complies, not because of fear, but to minimize disruption, yet the officer seems unsatisfied. He crouches slightly, examining the papers as if suspicion alone grants authority. He lifts a single sheet, flipping it carelessly, ignoring the professional markings and legal letterhead. Dwayne maintains his composure, speaking only when necessary. Each response is precise, deliberate, and measured, highlighting his calm under scrutiny. His tone is quiet, almost imperceptible over the officer's clipped commands. Yet in every sentence, there is clarity, authority, a quiet defiance embedded in professionalism. The second officer moves closer, shadowing the first. The Bodycam lens captures the tension radiating outward. Neighbors gripping fences, the teen jogging hesitantly past, the couple whispering to each other without drawing attention. The dog in the yard barks again, then stops. Minutes stretch. The first officer now insists on repeated identification. Dwayne provides it each time, unchanged, calm. The officer's demands grow increasingly specific and pedantic. Spell your name, state your address, list your profession. All procedural requests with no legal basis for repeated enforcement. The tone is authoritative, but the legality is absent. At one point, the first officer steps abruptly toward Dwayne's face, attempting to unsettle him. Dwayne leans back fractionally, enough to preserve personal space, but not enough to be interpreted as resistance. The officer tightens his jaw, gestures, and mutters instructions under his breath. The camera captures the microcosm, leaves swirling across papers, neighbors frozen in reaction, the slight shimmer of sweat on Dwayne's temple as sunlight hits it. The second officer now reaches for the briefcase. Dwayne raises a controlled hand. "Please do not touch my personal property," he says softly. The officer pauses, briefly, before letting go. Not because of deference, but because the restraint of authority is procedural, not thoughtful. Each passing minute amplifies the tension. The small acts, repeated questioning, unnecessary proximity, invasive inspection of personal items, form a pattern of escalating pressure with no legal justification. Dwayne's calm presence contrasts with the officer's mounting frustration. Meanwhile, the neighborhood acts as a silent witness. Mrs. Caldwell finally retreats into her yard, phone in hand but face tense, deciding whether to record. Mr. Thompson at the window fidgets with his blinds, uncertain. Javier resumes jogging but glances back repeatedly. The baby in the stroller squeals softly. The parents' whispered reassurances seem futile. The officer's escalation loops in microaggressions, repeated demands, unnecessary steps, verbal assertions of control without explanation. The body cam records every detail. The sound of cuffs shifting, the slight scuff of shoes on concrete, the faint rustle of papers in the breeze. Dwayne does not break. He does not panic. Every movement is precise, every breath controlled. His calm is a buffer against chaos. Yet the violation continues. Each officer's action, repetitive, invasive, unnecessary, builds a crescendo of procedural abuse. Minutes become a half-hour in perception. The first officer's impatience increases visibly. He paces slightly, speaking under his breath, gesturing at the street, at Dwayne, at neighbors. The second officer mimics posture, shadowing, reinforcing the assertion of control. The body cam captures the cumulative effect. A quiet professional restrained without cause, a neighborhood held in silent observation, officers escalating beyond reason, legality absent, authority unchecked. And still, no one yet knows the broader consequences of this morning's procedural spiral. The morning stretches on. Shadows from the trees have shifted, now falling at sharp angles across the sidewalk. The body cam lens records everything. Dwayne's composed stance, the clumsy tightening of cuffs, the subtle impatience in the first officer's shoulder. What the officers didn't know was that this street had more observers than they realized. A neighbor, leaning from a second-floor balcony, had her phone recording silently, framing the encounter from above. Another homeowner, who worked from home, had an exterior security camera trained on the sidewalk. Its time-stamped footage would later show the officers' repeated commands, the unnecessary physical restraint, and Dwayne's steady compliance. Inside the parked SUV, the dashcam of a passing police unit had activated automatically when the first officer's cruiser parked nearby. The wide-angle lens captured the officers surrounding Dwayne, the scattered papers, and the hesitant neighbors watching. Every angle reinforced the same visual truth. Dwayne did nothing to justify escalation. Down the block, Javier, the teenager jogging, had paused again, this time recording with a phone tucked into his sleeve. He didn't speak. He just captured the movement, the posture, the tension, unaware that his footage would later corroborate a pattern of procedural abuse. The officers, oblivious, continue their microescalation. One kneels slightly to inspect the scattered papers, ignoring Dwayne's request to avoid touching personal property. Another stands close behind, pen in hand, muttering indistinctly while documenting what he believes is a lawful interaction. The body cam captures every micro-gesture, paper brushing against concrete, eyes scanning, fists tightening, the faint sheen of sweat. Meanwhile, the couple with the baby observes quietly from the curb. The mother whispers to the father, concern audible despite the officer's near shouting. The father gestures subtly toward the house across the street, hoping to avoid attention while acknowledging that the scene is being recorded in multiple directions. Dwayne, still calm, notices the small details, the glint of a camera lens in a window, the reflection of his image in a parked car's windshield. He does not act on it. He maintains composure, aware that every movement is being captured from multiple perspectives. His awareness contrasts with the officer's tunnel vision, their focus entirely on him, blind to the silent witnesses. The first officer repeats a demand, unnecessary, pedantic, without legal basis. Dwayne responds calmly, his words precise. The second officer adjusts his stance again, stepping closer, unaware that multiple cameras are documenting his overreach. What they didn't know was that Dwayne's briefcase contained a secure digital recorder. Every interaction, every command, every raised voice, every invasive gesture from the officers was being logged internally. Later, the exact timestamps would align perfectly with the body cam and neighbor footage, creating a triangulated record of events. The scattered papers, legal briefs, client documents, flutter lightly in the breeze. The officer kneels to rearrange them. unaware of how this minor act will later illustrate the officer's disregard for property, privacy, and protocol. The neighborhood remains quietly attentive. Mrs. Caldwell, still at her fence, keeps her phone pointed toward the scene. Mr. Singh leans out again, satchel forgotten, silently recording. Even the jogger, moving slowly past, ensures the camera stays trained. Every silent witness compounds the evidence forming around Dwayne's restraint and the officer's overreach. The tension is nearly tactile. Each sound, cuff clicks, breath, shuffling shoes, leaves stirring, resonates against the stillness. The officers escalate further, unaware that everything is being captured. Their actions, meant to enforce authority, instead document their violation. Dwayne remains composed. His body language communicates compliance, dignity, and awareness. His calm is not passive, it's deliberate. Every recorded second builds a picture the officers cannot yet see. Their escalation is unjustified, documented, and already forming the foundation for accountability. Minutes stretch without resolution. Every camera, every recording, every silent witness captures the same story: procedural abuse, unchecked authority, and an unshakable subject who refuses to react with fear or aggression. The bodycam keeps rolling. The morning, quiet but watchful, records the unfolding tension. And in that quiet, the audience, seeing what the officers cannot, understands the inevitable truth. The officers are trapped in their own escalation, their overreach already forming the evidence that will define the encounter. The morning sun has climbed higher. Shadows shorten, but tension remains thick on the sidewalk. The officers, unaware of the network of recordings surrounding them, continue their routine of escalating control. Repeated commands, invasive proximity, and unnecessary inspection of Dwayne's documents persist. Yet every gesture of authority only underscores the imbalance. Dwayne's composure is absolute. He shifts slightly to ease the pressure of the cuffs, careful not to make sudden movements. His calm contrasts sharply with the officer's growing agitation. Sweat glistens on the first officer's brow. His eyes dart to the second officer for silent validation. Neither notices the broader perspective, the silent witnesses, the cameras, the precise documentation of every misstep. Then a subtle change occurs. Dwayne, still restrained, begins to speak with the quiet authority of someone who does not need to raise their voice to command attention. He references the constitutional protections at play, the Fourth Amendment, the limits of probable cause, the rules governing detention, not as a lecture, but as a statement of fact. His words are calm, deliberate, precise. The officers hear them, but their tone and posture betray uncertainty. Across the street, Mrs. Caldwell continues filming. Mr. Singh lowers his phone just long enough to nod toward Dwayne, recognizing the professional's subtle shift. The couple with the baby leans forward, observing the interaction with new awareness. Even the jogger slows his pace, sensing the change in the dynamic. Dwayne does not shout. He does not gesture dramatically. Instead, the weight of his presence, combined with the authority embedded in his knowledge of the law, begins to recalibrate the scene. Every command the officers give now feels fragile, unnecessary, easily contradicted by facts and legal precedent. The first officer glances at the second, confusion creeping into his posture. He adjusts the cuffs again, perhaps subconsciously trying to reassert dominance. Dwayne, however, remains unflinching. His body language communicates confidence, control, and an unwavering sense of procedural correctness. Then he subtly references the recordings. Not loudly, not confrontationally, just enough to let the officers sense that everything, their movements, their commands, their overreach, has been observed, documented, triangulated. The mention is quiet, almost incidental, but the shift is immediate. The officers hesitate. Their microaggressions falter. The repetitive questioning pauses. For the first time, uncertainty enters the body language. The scattered papers on the sidewalk, once ignored or disrupted, now form a silent testament to the encounter. The letters, legal briefs, and documents demonstrate professionalism, the gravity of Dwayne's work, and his status as someone who understands and commands the law. The officer's prior treatment, tight cuffs, invasive proximity, repeated demands, now reads clearly as overreach. Neighbors begin to exhale subtly. The tension that had gripped the block relaxes fractionally, the collective awareness shifting toward Dwayne's control of the situation. The first officer's voice loses some volume. The second officer fidgets, unconsciously retreating. The power dynamic has inverted quietly, imperceptibly, yet unmistakably. Dwayne straightens, subtly tilting his head to meet the first officer's gaze. There is no anger, no triumph. Just a quiet authority that reframes the encounter. Every invasive gesture by the officers now highlights their misjudgment. Their overreach is visible not only to the body cam, but to the audience, the neighborhood, and, ultimately, to history. Minutes pass in this suspended recalibration. The officers, trapped in procedural escalation they cannot justify, finally pause. The threat they believe they held has shifted. The sidewalk, once a stage of intimidation, has become a testament to restraint, law, and presence. And yet, the encounter is not over. The cuffs are still on. The officers have not released Dwayne. The papers are still scattered. The tension remains, just muted, the reversal quiet but undeniable. The camera continues rolling, capturing the moment when authority and composure quietly, almost imperceptibly, overpower aggression and assumption. No words are shouted. No dramatic gestures are needed. The scene has already flipped. The morning watches. The street waits. The realignment is complete, yet the resolution remains ahead, unseen, building toward the consequences that will follow. The body cam continues to record as the officers finally step back, hands slightly raised in hesitation. Dwayne's wrists remain cuffed, but the immediate power shift has reframed the encounter. From the sidewalk, the scene expands outward, not in physical distance, but in implication. Inside the police department, the morning's report is written. The first officer types hurriedly, repeating the phrases he's been trained to use, carefully omitting the hesitation, the repeated questioning, the invasive inspection of documents. But the internal system does not notice the body cam footage has already begun circulating quietly. The footage reaches internal affairs within hours. Analysts pause at the tight shots, the clarity of Dwayne's compliance, the officer's procedural missteps. The calm, controlled attorney, juxtaposed against repeated commands without legal basis, stands out in stark contrast. The IA review begins the slow work of correlating witness statements, security camera footage, and recordings from multiple angles. What the officers did not yet see was the precedent building quietly in other cases. Previous complaints had flagged patterns, unnecessary stops, repeated demands, overreach during routine pedestrian encounters. These patterns had been documented but often dismissed, minor infractions buried in departmental bureaucracy. Now, the combination of live recording, witness corroboration, and Dwayne's stature as a civil rights attorney brings the scrutiny to the federal level. The Department of Justice is alerted. A senior analyst reviews the video, noting micro-level procedural violations that add up to systemic concern. Each movement, the tight cuffs, repeated identification demands, invasive inspection of personal property, aligns with previous documented incidents in a troubling pattern. Meanwhile, neighbors who captured their own footage submit copies anonymously. Security camera timestamped files, phone recordings, and even Javier's brief jogger footage begin to converge. The collective evidence paints an unmistakable picture. Dwayne Johnson was fully compliant, yet the officers escalated without cause. At this point, what began as an isolated sidewalk confrontation expands into institutional scrutiny. Internal Affairs requests full duty logs, prior complaint histories, training records, and body cam archives. The officers' previous minor infractions, once overlooked, are now aggregated into a comprehensive review of pattern behavior. Even the local community association, alerted by Mrs. Caldwell and other witnesses, petitions for transparency. Emails are sent, inquiries made, and neighborhood meetings convened. The encounter, once a brief morning disruption, now ripples outward. Policies, protocols, and oversight mechanisms, all procedural structures meant to prevent abuse, come under examination. The body cam footage, juxtaposed against historical complaints and neighborhood evidence, begins to tell a larger story. This was not a singular lapse of judgment, but part of a broader systemic failure. The narrative shifts from immediate intimidation to institutional accountability. Dwayne remains calm throughout. Even as agencies review the footage and emails circulate to supervisors and federal analysts, he does not speak publicly. His professional demeanor, recorded across multiple angles, strengthens the credibility of the evidence. His restraint now frames the narrative. And yet, the officers remain unaware of the full scope of attention descending upon them. The systemic pressure is invisible in the moment, silent but unrelenting, like the shadows stretching across the sidewalk earlier in the morning. The sidewalk, the scattered papers, the quietly observing neighbors, all are now pieces of a growing institutional puzzle. The escalation that seemed momentary has become the seed of far-reaching scrutiny. The body cam keeps rolling, and the consequences, still unseen to the officers, are quietly assembling, piece by piece. Within days, the first officer is placed on administrative leave. The second officer follows suit. Internal Affairs cites procedural violations, failure to adhere to detention protocols, and excessive escalation without lawful justification. The department's legal counsel begins reviewing prior incidents tied to both officers, discovering a series of complaints previously dismissed as minor. The body cam footage becomes central. Every click of the cuffs, every unnecessary command, every invasive gesture is cataloged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against witness accounts. Neighbor recordings, security cameras, and Dwayne's internal recorder provide a triangulated record, indisputable in both detail and consistency. The department realizes that the pattern is now undeniable. The officer's escalation was not isolated. It was a repeated behavioral trend. At the federal level, DOJ analysts note that the repeated overreach violated constitutional rights, forming the basis for potential civil liability and criminal referral. Prosecutors, reviewing the compiled evidence, filed charges for abuse of authority and civil rights violations. The indictment is narrow, precise, grounded in observable actions rather than conjecture, yet enough to threaten both careers. The trial is methodical. The prosecution presents synchronized footage from multiple angles: body cam, neighborhood cameras, Dwayne's own internal recorder. Witnesses testify: neighbors who froze mid-morning, Javier the jogger, the couple with the baby. Each corroborates the timeline: the officer's repeated, unnecessary commands, and Dwayne's calm compliance. The judge allows the visual evidence to carry the weight of the narrative, highlighting the officer's pattern of behavior. Dwayne appears in court not as a plaintiff screaming injustice, but as a professional witness to his own experience. His composure, documented from start to finish, reinforces the credibility of the evidence. The jury observes the contrast between his calm authority and the officer's repeated, legally unjustified escalation. Verdict and sentencing follow, measured but firm. Both officers are convicted of civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and official misconduct. Suspensions, fines, and short-term incarceration are imposed in line with precedents, alongside professional decertification. Civil lawsuits are filed. Settlements exceed hundreds of thousands of dollars, compensating for the public humiliation, violation of rights, and emotional toll on Dwayne. The department is forced to review and update protocols, retrain personnel, and submit to federal oversight in select precincts. Policies governing pedestrian stops, cuffing procedures, and repeated demands for identification are rewritten. The officers' careers collapse gradually but irreversibly, while Dwayne's professional reputation remains intact, bolstered, in fact, by the calm authority and legal rigor he demonstrated under duress. Even as media coverage spreads locally, the emphasis remains procedural and factual. The narrative focuses on systemic lessons, not sensationalism. The morning's sidewalk encounter, once a fleeting and isolated event, becomes a case study in accountability, training, and the cost of unchecked escalation. And yet, the memory of the struggle, the sound of cuffs, the scattered papers, the tense silence of the street, lingers. It is a reminder: procedural failure and unchecked authority leave consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate moment. Weeks after the trial, the sidewalk where it all began is quiet again, but the memory of the encounter lingers in the neighborhood. Leaves drift across the cracks in the pavement, brushing against faintly scuffed concrete where Dwayne's papers once lay. The street seems ordinary, but those who witnessed the morning remember the tension, the silence, the subtle but undeniable assertion of authority that changed the course of events. Dwayne returns to his morning walks, briefcase in hand, documents carefully tucked inside. He keeps the same deliberate pace, eyes scanning the surroundings as always. But there is a quiet sense of security now. The legal system has validated his rights, and the procedural overreach has been corrected. His presence in the community, once a professional figure of law, is now also a symbol of resilience and accountability. Neighborhood dynamics begin to shift subtly. Mrs. Caldwell, still sipping her morning coffee by the fence, now greets Dwayne with a nod of recognition rather than tentative curiosity. Javier, the teenager who had jogged past the scene, posts a reflective video online analyzing the morning encounter and the officer's overreach, earning local attention for his calm, observational storytelling. The couple with the baby shares their experience quietly with neighbors, emphasizing the importance of being observant and informed. At the police department, systemic reforms take root. Policies governing pedestrian stops, use of handcuffs, and repeated demands for identification are rewritten with federal oversight. Officers undergo retraining on constitutional rights, procedural limits, and implicit bias. Every patrol unit is reminded that authority is a responsibility, not a tool to assert dominance. Internal Affairs now maintains a stricter review protocol, flagging even minor deviations to prevent escalation before it occurs. The officers who overstepped are permanently decertified. Their careers end quietly but undeniably. The community watches, understanding that the consequences are not dramatic spectacles but procedural corrections, measured, inevitable, and in line with the law. Their downfall is a warning. Unchecked behavior, even in the guise of routine authority, carries real, enforceable consequences. Civil suits and settlements follow. The funds compensate for the humiliation, emotional strain, and violation of constitutional rights. Dwayne does not flaunt the settlements. He keeps them private, a professional acknowledgement of injustice corrected. Yet, the ripple effect of his restraint and legal presence spreads further than money or headlines. It becomes an example, a lesson for officers, neighborhoods, and attorneys alike. Media coverage emphasizes the factual narrative, not sensationalism. The story becomes a case study for law schools, police academies, and civil rights organizations. Discussions focus on compliance, legal authority, procedural correctness, and the subtle power of calm, professional resistance in the face of repeated procedural abuse. Dwayne's own professional network takes note. His reputation strengthens not because he fought with volume or anger, but because he allowed evidence, law, and calm authority to speak for him. Colleagues refer to the case as a modern example of how preparation, knowledge, and composure can counter unchecked authority without escalating conflict. The morning sidewalk remains. The rustle of leaves, the scattered shadows, the distant hum of traffic, all are quiet witnesses to what occurred. The bodycam footage exists as an enduring record, a reminder that oversight, observation, and documentation matter. Those who walk the street now know. Any authority unchecked can overstep, but accountability can restore balance. If the law is followed, evidence preserved, and courage exercised with professionalism. In the end, the story is neither cinematic spectacle nor dramatic heroism. It is a lesson in procedural justice, the quiet weight of compliance and observation, and the ripple effect of accountability. The camera stops rolling. The papers have been gathered. The street exhales. And the lesson remains. If this could happen to a calm, respected civil rights attorney, it could happen to anyone. And that is why vigilance, lawfulness, and documentation are essential.